Move on now to questions about health care. In this round, Ms. McMahon, you will answer first, followed by Mr. Simmons and then Mr. Schiff. Our first health care question. Millions of Americans do not have health care insurance, including close to 50,000 here in Connecticut. Many Democrats are pushing for a single-payer system of health insurance to provide coverage for all Americans. But many people believe a single-payer system would adversely affect an insurance industry that employs tens of thousands of people here in Connecticut. As a senator representing us, how would you move forward on reducing health care costs and providing for the uninsured without damaging Connecticut's insurance industry? Ms. McMahon.
Well, certainly health care is on the minds and tongues of everyone these days because our president has certainly made this a priority issue. The majority of Americans have all said they want health care reform. That same majority has said they don't want Obamacare. And we don't want Obamacare for a lot of reasons. One, the way the bill came out of both the House and the Senate. It was done behind closed doors with special interests. The people of America don't have confidence in this bill. It's not going to reduce costs. It's going to raise premiums for families. It's going to cost businesses more with their taxes. It's going to penalize seniors by reducing Medicare. And, we just cannot have this kind of a health care bill. We don't want anything to come between the doctor-patient relationship. We first got to take costs out of health care. We can do that by proposals that have been made. Tort reform, bringing down malpractice insurance, which will absolutely take out about $240 billion a year out of the private sector that has to pay these high costs. And we also can pool our resources and buy insurance across state lines.
All right, you've just come perilously close to answering our second question on health care, but we'll stick with this question for now. And Mr. Simmons, to you, how would you reduce costs and provide for the uninsured without damaging Connecticut's insurance industry?
I would oppose a single-payer system because that, to me, is not health insurance reform. That is essentially government-run insurance and government-run health care. I would oppose the government option, and I've opposed the government option throughout the last year, ever since it first came up. I think it's a terribly bad idea. I speak to this issue in part because as a veteran, you would think I would be eligible for government-run health care through the VA system, the Veterans Administration system. After 37 years of service and 4 years in a war zone, you would think I would be eligible. But I'm a priority 8, so I'm not eligible. What that means is the government is inefficient in providing access, inefficient in reducing costs, and does not extend full coverage to people when they are solely responsible for their care. What we need to do is address the issue of cost through eliminating defensive medicine, which costs us over $100 billion a year. Tort liability claims are eating up our resources in health care. We have to work very hard to have... I have to work very hard to slip over to the rebuttal phase. Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right, Mr. Schiff, to you.
Sure. Well, before we can solve the problems of health care, we have to understand the nature of those problems. The free market is the best mechanism that we know to bring costs down. And we've all experienced that in our daily lives. We see it in cellular telephones, flat-screen TVs, laptop computers. Every year they get more complicated, more intricate, yet every year the price comes down. Why isn't that working in health care? The reason is government. Government refuses to allow free market forces to operate in health care. Some of those reasons were pointed out by my opponents. But what we need to do is we need government to remove all the roadblocks, the regulations, the mandates, the subsidies that are distorting the free market and that are preventing it from delivering the benefits of affordable health care to all Americans.
All right, Mr. Schiff, thank you. We move on to the rebuttal phase on this question. I'd like to remind the candidates that a component of the question was improving and reforming health care without damaging an industry that's very important to our state, a major employer here. So perhaps you could tailor your remarks this time around in the rebuttal phase to that phase of the question. And Ms. McMahon, it's back to you.
I've met with some of our health care providers here in the state. I've met with hospital administrators and talked to them about the cost of health care. And, really, when I sit and talk to them, some things that I was not aware of were how many state mandates there are relative to insurance coverage and insurance premiums. This state, as do all states, regulate the insurance industry, and I think the state of Connecticut now has about 60 different mandates that an insurance company that's providing coverage must provide. So there's a cost to that. And if the service provided at the hospital for one of those covered things is not reimbursed to that level, healthcare picks up the difference. That's why with Medicare, when those reimbursements are reduced, then there's a bigger gap. And if we're looking to cut Medicare, insurance companies are going to have to pick up more of that cost. So I think we have to look at what the mandates are relative to insurance companies to see if there's not some room there to reduce those costs.
All right, Mr. Simmons.
Connecticut is known as the insurance capital of the world, and I would argue, given the state of our economy, given the state of our unemployment, we want to keep it that way. We want to make sure that good insurance jobs remain here in Connecticut, and especially in Hartford, where some of the big providers are located and where some very large investments have been made. But I would argue that the insurance industry could be a player in bringing about some of these cost savings. For example, I've argued that small businesses should be allowed to associate in what I call association health plans to reduce costs of health insurance by increasing the numbers that then negotiate. It would seem to me that the insurance industry would welcome this kind of business coming their way. I also believe it's important to break down the state barriers and allow individuals and entities to negotiate for their health insurance coverage across state lines. We do it for other kinds of insurance, car insurance, house insurance, fire insurance, flood insurance. Why shouldn't we be able to do it with health insurance? So I think there are a lot of good ideas where the industry can actually facilitate and do well as we move forward.
All right, thank you, Mr. Simmons. And Mr. Schiff, on to you.
Specifically, with insurance, one of the ways that the government can reintroduce market forces into the insurance industry is to stop incentivizing individuals to purchase their health insurance through their employers. It wasn't always that way. And, of course, we don't get our fire insurance, our homeowners insurance, our automobile insurance through our employers. And, first of all, employers don't give insurance to their workers. Workers earn insurance, and they accept insurance in lieu of the higher wages that they otherwise would have earned. I would like to fix the tax code so that individuals get the same tax breaks when they buy insurance directly as opposed to buying it through their employer. That's going to solve the portability problem. For most people, it's going to solve the pre-existing problem, and it's going to put the consumer back in charge so market forces can come to bear to control runaway insurance and health care costs.
All right, Mr. Schiff, thanks very much. All right, the next question, this is from an emailer, Don Tenerowitz of Ellington. This is a three-part question. Have you read the Senate version of the health care bill in its entirety? How would you vote on it? And what specific changes would you make to the bill, or if I might add, to health care reform legislation at all? And the first answer this time is to Ms. McMahon.
I have not read the full Senate version, nor do I doubt that many of the senators who have already voted on it have read it. Nor do I think the House members have read the bill that was passed there either. And that's part of the issue. Senators, congressmen do not have the opportunity to understand the bills that they are going to pass legislation on. So one of the things that I have said early on in this campaign was no less than a minimum of 72 hours should a bill be posted online. Now, if we want to think about that health care bill, there's probably a stack about that high. I'm not sure if you could even, I don't know how long it would take to download that to read it on your computer. But those are massive pieces of legislation. But we need to understand what it is that we're voting on. And it's back and forth, back and forth. The Senate has one bill they're trying to push through now. Now we've got this whole issue of reconciliation. It's just the wrong way to get this bill passed. It's ramming it down our throats. This is not a bipartisan effort. The system was flawed. The process was flawed for this bill, and we've got flawed legislation coming out of it.
All right, Ms. McMahon, thank you. Mr. Simmons.
I have not read the bill. I did read the Dodd bill some months ago. I was intrigued by it because it included a carve-out for members of Congress. So here was a piece of legislation being proposed by the chairman of the Banking Committee that was, in this particular case, as a member of the Health Committee, 700 pages without the amendments included that had a carve-out for members of Congress. You can be sure that that bill was no good because if it was any good, members of Congress would have wanted to be included. You don't really have to read all of these bills anymore to realize what they're all about. They're not about reform. They're about government takeover of health care, which is something that I oppose. I made it a habit as a member of the Connecticut General Assembly and as a member of Congress not to vote for any bill that I did not have time to read. I felt that that was fair and that we have a responsibility to read this legislation before voting it up or down. And that certainly is a mechanism that I would intend to use in the future.
All right, Mr. Schiff.
No, I didn't read the bill, but I don't have to read the bill to know that I oppose it. I mean, I oppose it on principle. I oppose the concept that we need more government involvement in health care. I think government involvement in health care is one of the reasons that it's so expensive right now. So we need to reverse that. You know, government is already involved in health care. Look at what happened with Medicare. You know, Medicare actually costs more than 10 times, adjusted for inflation, what they originally estimated the cost would be. And now the unfunded liabilities are in excess of $30 trillion. After such a fiscal disaster, we can't afford to turn over more of our health care to the government.
All right, and you each have 1 more minute to talk about this. I didn't hear a lot of disagreement here, but you have 1 more minute for rebuttal, and it is back to Ms. McMahon.
Well, I think we all have agreed on this stage that none of us would want government takeover of health care, and I believe that's pretty much what was incorporated in a good part of these bills. We don't want government-run health care. I don't want, the public option. I don't want a single-payer option. I agree definitely with Peter that private enterprise and the private market system is what will bring costs down. I'll just give you an example. A friend of ours who lives out in Las Vegas went to get an MRI this past week. And he went in and he wanted to know how much the MRI was, and she told him it was $1,500. He said, well, I'm sorry, but I can't pay $1,500. I don't have any insurance. Come back with your best price. They charged him $650. Now, I don't know. Maybe we all go in and bargain to see what it is we're going to get. Sounds like a plan to me. But clearly there are some costs built in that we ought to be able to bring down. Free market.
All right, Mr. Simmons.
Yes, referring once again to my plan for prosperity and addressing the issue of health care as a real problem for small business. During a period in my life, I was covered by a private plan which I had to buy. I was between jobs and I had to buy the plan. And it went up dramatically. And even though my wife and I were working 4 jobs, part-time jobs between us, me 3 and she 1, and we're making some money, none of our jobs provided health care, and yet we weren't allowed to deduct the cost of our insurance policy from our income. I think that's wrong, and I think the unfair treatment, the unfair tax treatment of health care is a real problem. Large corporations and many businesses, large businesses, can deduct those costs before taxes. Individuals and many small businesses cannot. And that inequity is another problem that I think should not be hard to solve, and that we need to address if we're really going to allow the engine of our economy, small business, to recover, prosper, and create jobs.
All right, and Mr. Schiff.
Sure. I mentioned earlier that the free market is working to bring down costs in consumer electronics. And a lot of people think, well, that doesn't work with health care. But it does. It's actually working right now with eye LASIK surgery. The procedures are constantly getting better, and they're constantly getting less expensive. And the reason is insurance doesn't cover it. Consumers pay for it out of pocket, not through their paychecks, and so they do negotiate price. They do shop around, and the doctors performing the surgery know that. Unfortunately, we have a tax code that is encouraging an overutilization of insurance. We need to have the consumer more involved. We need to have routine medical procedures picked up out of pocket, and if the government would simply lower our taxes, which they could easily do, we'd have plenty of extra money to pay for the routine medical cares, and then insurance could be low cost for the catastrophic events that we all hope don't happen, but that we really need insurance for.
All right, thanks very much. As it happens now, we have time for an extra question. So I'm going to ask one that was on the minds of many of our emailers, our viewers and readers who emailed their suggestions